He's Howard Eibach, a former copywriter and creative director and the author of two books on the creative brief.
And he's Henry Gomez, an ad agency strategist with 29 years of experience. Together, Henry and I are the Brief Brothers. We love talking about advertising, creative briefs, and briefing. Henry, we're back with another episode, and I have to give kudos to one of our loyal viewers. His name is Brian Sherwin, and he sends me stuff from time to time, and I wanted to give him a shout out because this time he sent me a link to something that was posted by a strategist named Joe Burns. It was quite an impressive background. I'll let you talk about that. But this particular, I guess we'd call it a post-mortem of a spot that won the Grand Prix at Cannes just last week in the category of business to business. And he has some interesting things to say, and I thought this could be a fun topic to talk about. And you agreed, so here we are. And I'm going to kind of turn it over to you to let the strategist introduce what the strategist Joe Burns had to share. And I think we'll have a lively discussion about some of his observations. So, Henry, what are your thoughts on what Joe posted?
Yeah, so as you said, Joe Burns is a strategist. He's the strategy lead at an agency. Apparently, it's a boutique, creative boutique called Quality Meets a Creative. And uh, impressive resume. You know, he's been at Mother, he's been at BBH. So definitely a strategist with chops, and he gives what he says is a an honest tear down from the point of view of somebody who was actually there and did it. And the truth is, there's a lot of people that do postmortems and tear downs of award-winning work that are doing it from arm's length. So he calls it a tiny, truthful teardown of the strategy behind GoDaddy Arrow's Grand Prix winning campaign, delivered in 5 lessons for strategists. So this is related to strategy. It's related to the brief, but it's also generally about advertising and frankly, good advertising. Um, so one of the things that he mentions is that clients only say they don't need strategy when they haven't seen good strategy, and I tend to believe that that's true. Although I think most clients these days generally accept that the agency is going to assign a strategist to their business and that they're going to pay for it. I think when strategy was new, there was a lot of why do I need strategy for? But as we are fond of saying here on the Brief Brothers, there's a bell curve in every profession. And so there's a lot of adequate strategists, and there's a significant, not insignificant number of shitty strategists. And then there are
Mhm.
some brilliant strategists and brilliant strategy out there that, are the ones that we see in case studies like this. So he kind of says, bloated decks, weeks of strategic alignment calls. It's comfort theater that costs a fortune and goes nowhere. With so much beige slog, who wouldn't say skip strategy? And so he, in his behind the scenes of what happened for this GoDaddy campaign, talks about what the client gave them as basically the single-minded proposition or the objective of the campaign, which was to show how GoDaddy Arrow accelerates growth for unstoppable confidence. And
And should we say that Arrow is this AI-driven uh, technology that allows, average Joes to build a website, to do social media, to do almost everything that you would need to launch a
correct,
business?
correct, and for people living under a rock, GoDaddy is a company that, as when it started, was a company that was primarily associated with registering domain names very cheaply, and they offered obviously other services related to websites and so forth. But that space has become very competitive. There's a lot of
Yeah.
tools out there now, like WordPress, Wix, Squarespace, that integrate all kinds of e-commerce capability and so forth. So they're in a very crowded marketplace, and they're not necessarily known so much for website building tools and brand identity building tools and so forth. So this campaign was for, as you said, an AI driven tool that GoDaddy has. So again, the client is saying, show how GoDaddy Aero accelerates growth for unstoppable confidence. And Joe says uh, that it's not bad. It has emotion, but it really didn't have tension. So what he says the key thing that happened was that they teamed up with the GoDaddy customer insights lead, which I think is a lesson within itself, right? Which is you have to press the flesh with the people that count, right? And if you're a strategist, you have to ingratiate yourself with the guardian of the research at the client and ingratiate yourself, and maybe you'll learn something from that person. Probably sits at their desk all day waiting for an audience to for, to tell their tales to. And so here comes the strategist. And so they combed hundreds of survey answers in search of something, and he describes it as raw. Of course, there's a lot of meat metaphors because of the agency name Quality Meats. And so they found an interview, a small business owner who gave an open-ended response of, most days I feel like I'm faking it, which I think we're all familiar with the idea of imposter syndrome, but
Yep.
it's interesting,
Common.
we hear about it in the corporate world, but in the startup small business world, there's no doubt that it can exist too, right? Like, I mean, there's no reason that it wouldn't exist. So you're trying to start a business, you feel like an imposter, you feel like you're faking it. So they turned that around, and they said, and that created the strategy, which they basically said small business owners, even successful ones, often feel like they're faking it. The truly cool thing about GoDaddy isn't that it makes building a website feel easy. It's that it makes you feel like you're nailing it at being a legit shit hot business. It gives you more confidence in what you're doing, along with the tools to scale it bigger and better. So incorporating what the client had given them about kind of like the growth part, but making it sexier. GoDaddy gives business owners, the confidence boosting website tools to keep nailing it, even when they feel like they're faking it. So that's the kind of agency version of that single-minded proposition, or the single-minded proposition that's the agency-fied version of that objective that the client had
Hmm.
given them.
Hmm.
And so it essentially worked out for them. They came up with a campaign, and we could describe the campaign. I might just or we could drop the link to the case study film. It's 2 minutes long.
Hello, Cannes Lion judges. I've never been in a Cannes Lion entry before, so I don't really know what I'm doing. But I'm going to make it look like I know what I'm doing because I am an actor.
I can make you believe I'm a detective without ever stepping foot in an actual crime scene. Whoops, I have no idea what these buttons do. I've never driven a stick in my life! On my hardest role yet, small business owner.
Because I really didn't know what I was doing, which is where GoDaddy Aero came in. Using AI to build me a logo, a website, and social content so I could start Walton Goggins goggle glasses.
Because if your goggles ain't Goggins, they don't belong on your noggins.
Did they really launch an entire sunglasses brand for a GoDaddy Super Bowl spot? It seems so ridiculous. But the thing is, the glasses actually exist. This masterful slow burn started all the way back in November. There's a fully functional website built with GoDaddy Aero, which is a new AI software that helps brands build their website.
GoDaddy helped me launch my business, then showed the world how. There was a Super Bowl ad.
I'm observing some debris coming from Uranus.
online videos out of home, earn coverage.
GoDaddy says its AI component can make anyone look like we know what we're doing, even when we have no clue.
And social content. Thousands of earned media placements generating billions of impressions.
This is working.
They committed to long-term storytelling and literally built a business to help hook people and get them emotionally invested.
We doubled the traffic to GoDaddy, and I sold so many Walton Goggins goggle glasses.
I feel very cool in these.
You ever cut onions in these bad boys?
Oh, I've cut onions in them.
Oh, I can't wait to cut onions in these.
How did I do?
The idea is that they hired this character actor, Walton Goggins, a good actor, to appear in a Super Bowl spot in which he basically spends the first part of the spot convincing you that he's a good actor. And then says, but the part where he acts the most is when he's acting as a small business owner, kind of he's that imposter, right? He's not really a small business owner any more than he's a crime scene investigator. And then he talks about his small business, which is these Goggins goggle glass sunglasses. And they created, part of this campaign was they created the company and they sold sunglasses, but it led to increased usage and purchase of this Arrow suite of tools. And that is what ultimately won it, the Grand Prix at Cannes.
And so
yeah.
And
Go
so
ahead.
one of the cool things about the fact that it won a Grand Prix at Cannes is the category, isn't it?
Yeah. So I did want to touch on that, and I thought that it was really interesting because there's and I'm not knocking this case study at all. This was brilliant work, definitely deserved
Yes.
to win a Cannes. And so
Absolutely.
I don't want
I
anyone to
agree.
take this the wrong way. But there was a clever bit of gamesmanship in terms of entering it in a B2B into the B2B creative category. Technically, it is B2B work, right? Like this is about small business startup owners, right? So it is. But the reality is most B2B work is like talking like corporate procurement people and IT specialists and things like that. And this campaign ran in the biggest consumer media event that exists, which is the Super Bowl. So, and the audience for this B2B product is consumers that are turning into small business people. So, uh,
Are thinking about it.
I totally get why they did it, and it's a smart move, and it paid off for them. So I have to acknowledge it and say very kudos to them for choosing the category. I mean, you've talked about entering categories that nobody else has entered, and it's a trick for agencies. And here, I mean, the typical B2B work is not very sexy. So all of a sudden you had this Super Bowl spot used for what is technically is a B2B campaign. And I thought that was rather clever.
I think that the work that stands out as being clever and being creative in the B2B category is rare, and it makes that work stand out even more. I mean, I can think of a handful of B2B campaigns in the last number of years. The one that stands out for me is Hewlett Packard, their business to business campaign with Christian Slater. It was like creating an atmosphere of fear. If you don't know what's going on in your printers, this is an opening for hackers to get into your proprietary information. And the whole spot was built around that fear. And it was fun. It was laugh out loud funny. But that sets it apart.
Yeah.
from
So
most B2B creative.
we've talked a lot about, what I love is advertising for boring clients and boring products because
Yeah.
if you do great work, it stands out. I a couple of years ago was asked to judge the Nebraska Addies, and there was a lot of like farm equipment and stuff like that, and some of the work was brilliant. It's
Yep.
like when you do good work in what should be a boring category, it's definitely a huge plus.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a fascinating dissection, a post-mortem, which was the term that you used, of a wildly popular case study and I think a popular win. Good stuff, Henry.
Good stuff, Howard.
He's Henry Gomez.
He's Howard Eibach, and together we're the Brief Brothers. Till next time, bye bye.